You ever hear a rumor so crazy that it actually just might be true? Well, I just stumbled upon one. That SWIFT, the 50-year-old global banking network, might be secretly tapping XRP without any official partnership. Now, it sounds wild, right? Well, stick around because I went down a rabbit hole to find out if there's any truth to this. Now, let me just set the scene here. SWIFT is basically the, nervous system of international banking. It's how banks talk to each other and to move money across the borders. It's reliable, but kind of like a snail mail. Slow, with fees that make you sigh. Now, Ripple, they came along with XRP as a kind of trustly steed, I guess, to kind of challenge that, promising near instant settlement cross-border payments. For, well, years, XRP holders have been kind of dreaming of the day that SWIFT and Ripple team up, or at least that Ripple's tech straight up just replaces SWIFT. But so far, no official partnership, right? The high fives, nothing, right? It's just like SWIFT and Ripple are, I guess, at the same party, but just not making eye contact. It's frustrating if you're cheering for crypto to finally kind of mingle with traditional finance. So imagine my intrigue then when I find an analyst, or an analysis I should say, from an XRP community researcher known as Smoke, right, claiming that Ripple and SWIFT can actually interact without any formal partnership, basically a kind of secret kind of backdoor, if you will. Now, you can bet that I did a double take. Now, according to this analysis, the trick isn't a direct integration. It's actually using third-party companies as bridges. So think of big software firms like SAP or, Tem Norris, right, that many kind of banks already kind of use for their payment systems. Now, these companies, Smoke says, have built API connectors, that actually can take a SWIFT payment message and funnel it into RippleNet. Now, in particular, right, we're talking about SWIFT's MT103 messages. Now, that's the standard format for international payment instructions, by the way. And they're being piped through an API into Ripple's network. Now, stay with me here, because it's actually pretty clever what they're doing. Now, when a bank sends a payment over SWIFT using their newer SWIFT GPI system, for example, well, that payment information can simultaneously be sent through those vendor APIs to RippleNet. RippleNet sees the incoming payment details and can then do its thing, route the transaction, maybe even convert currencies through an exchange, and use XRP as a liquidity tool to settle up. End result, the money gets to where it needs to go, and XRP quietly greased the wheels in the background. Now, all of this without SWIFT ever actually directly talking to Ripple or even knowing XRP was involved at all. It's kind of like sending a letter through the postal service, but a copy of it gets kind of teleported to the destination by a friendly alien tech. Now, in this case, that's Ripple. So it arrives faster in that case, right? Now, the postal service still thinks it's delivered the letter, but really, XRP helped it along secretly. Now, when I first kind of read this, I had one of those, wait, this could actually work kind of moments. Could banks really be doing this, using XRP on the sly, courtesy of some tech middleman, while SWIFT kind of headquarters is just chilling, unaware of it all? It's a bit like finding out two people who kind of, I guess, have been working together through a kind of mutual friend after insisting that they would never actually speak to each other. It's kind of mind-blowing, right? And frankly, as an XRP holder, it's pretty exciting. But I'm also a skeptic at heart here. So this analysis was interesting, yet it wasn't from SWIFT or from Ripple officially, right? It was just a community guy speculating. So that's one thing, and he didn't even show official docs or any sources, which is a bit of a red flag. So I needed more proof than just an anonymous diagram on Twitter, because, they're 10 to the dozen. And guess what? I wasn't alone in this rabbit hole. This whole idea started kind of picking up buzz in the XRP community enough that it did actually catch the attention of a prominent XRP YouTuber who goes by the name of 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰. Now, she basically said, all right, this sounds crazy. Let's ask someone who would actually know. So she reached out to, at least publicly, to Neil Hatner, a Ripple software engineer who works on Ripple's payments tech. Now, if anyone could debunk or confirm this, it would be Ripple's devs, right? Well, now, usually, people at big companies are super cautious on social media. They'll give you the kind of standard no comment or just ignore rumors. But to everyone's surprise, Neil actually responded, and he didn't just shut it down. He said their scenario was plausible, his word, not mine, technically feasible, in fact. Right, he elaborated that a bank could take the MT103 message, the Swift payment info, and send it into RippleNet via API using something called the additional_info field to carry the data transaction. Carry the data. Now, the transaction here is a bank that could, slip a payment details into a kind of sidecar field, and RippleNet could know what to do with it. Neil basically confirmed that yes, this kind of indirect bridge could be built. Now, he did throw in some caution here though, right? He literally said, don't read too much into my answer, right? And he didn't really confirm if any vendors are actually doing this, probably because NDAs or just not wanting to stir the pot. Now, I can respect that, right? He's not trying to ignite a frenzy here, but come on, right? The guy basically nodded and winked, and at least at the idea, without kind of outright dismissing it. Now, that was enough, I guess, to send the mind racing with possibilities. So the tech checks out then. There's a way for Swift and RippleNet to basically have a handshake through a secret translator in the middle of nowhere. So how, is that really even possible, you might ask? Well, one big reason, ISO 20022. Now, if that sounds like a random collection of numbers, well, I guess it kind of really is, right? But it's also important because ISO 20022 is the global standard, for in financial messages. Basically, a common language that banks and payment systems are starting to use to talk to each other. Right now, RippleNet adopted ISO 20022 very early on, which means that it speaks the same language for payments that many systems, banking systems, are shifting to today. So let's think of it this way, like a Unicode for money messages. It doesn't matter if one system uses dollars and another system uses yen, as long as they both adhere to the same standard. They can understand each other. Now, Swift and RippleNet both use ISO 20022, and it is like they've agreed to write in the same language. Now, this common standard is a huge deal for making different systems play rather nice. It means messages don't get lost in translation as easily, and it opens the door for APIs and even blockchain networks to work alongside the old systems without having, or at least without everything, I guess, breaking on down. All right, so I'm getting a little bit excited here because this is kind of where the tech and the big picture vision kind of meet together. Ripple had the foresight to align with the standard that the old guard also uses, right, which is kind of genius. It's kind of like if you were, I guess, inventing a new gadget, making sure that it uses the same charging ports as everyone else's gadgets, right? Less friction means more adoption. Now, before we all kind of start thinking XRP is about to secretly run the banking world, let me kind of pause here for just a second and be super clear about one thing. And this one might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Now, neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video today is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Now, we had to get that out there because, yeah, right, I'm jazzed about the possibilities, but none of this is a sure thing or investment advice. Now, with all that said, let's talk about the future, the speculative, what if, that really kind of got me hooked onto this story then. Now, a lot of XRP enthusiasts have this kind of running fantasy. What if Ripple doesn't just partner with Swift, but straight up kind of replaces it? Or at least becomes the kind of new standard for a big chunk of international payments. It sounds crazy, but then I came across something that made it feel slightly less crazy. Ripple's CEO, Brad Garlinghouse, the guy, steering the ship, gave some numbers in a recent Ripple event. Now, he said that the XRP ledger could potentially handle up to 14% of Swift's volume by 2030. 14% of Swift's volume. The transactions here, right, it's funneled all the way through XRP's ledger. Now, if I kind of had to kind of replay, that to kind of make sure that I did hear it right. Now consider this, right? Swift moves about $150 trillion across the borders each year. Yeah, that was trillion with a T, right? It's the kind of backbone of global money movements. Now, if you take 14% of that, you get something like $21 trillion a year, possibly flowing through the XRP ledger instead of the old Swift routes. So $21 trillion, that's a number that's so big that it's honestly hard to wrap your head around it. It's kind of like if the entire economy of a country, the size of the US or China, ran on the XRP ledger for a couple of months. Now, here's where things, I guess, where every kind of XRP holder's eyes do really light up, right? More volume on the XRP ledger means more demand for XRP, right? Well, some clever people did the math here, right? They estimated that to handle that kind of volume, XRP would need a huge liquidity pool, roughly around $700 billion. Now, that doesn't mean that XRP's market cap has to be $700 billion, no. Though you could frame it that way if you really wanted to, but it would be wrong, in my opinion, and as per the math, it would just be wrong. It just means that about $700 billion worth of XRP would need to be in play, and basically facilitating the trades, the transfers at any given time with the current circulating supply of XRP, guesstimating that could translate to around XRP's price, in the kind of ballpark figure of $11 to $24. However, with that estimate, we also have to consider the thin liquidity that we currently have, right? We can't just inject $700 billion into the market without a massive, massive move to the upside, simply because there isn't enough sell pressure to actually soak up, $700 billion of buying pressure, right? So if you want to see price, tame, then you need to see basically like $700 billion of selling at the same time as you have $700 billion of buying pressure, then you have a static market, right? That's not the case. At the moment, there's very, very little selling pressure going on. So as a result of like $700 billion coming in, your price would more than likely exceed $100 to $200. And, that's still a little bit conservative as well in these scenarios. So the math that a lot of people are checking out, they just assume market cap, is basically liquidity, and it is not, right? Market cap does not represent liquidity. You can check out the other videos on the channel here or join us in the Discord if you want more details about it. So anyway, these guys, these clever guys, if you will, using market cap as a barrier to price, they are saying $11 to $24. And yeah, you did hear that right. It was 2 digits, right? So it's a pretty decent level considering we're subpar levels at the moment, right? We're single digits, right? So it's possible, given some of these scenarios, if they do play out. Now, when I saw that, I did, of course, nearly spit out the coffee to a degree, because the idea that, liquidity injections equal a market cap is just laughable. And I wish people would just take the time to actually think it through logically rather than just jumping on the bandwagon of market cap. Market cap is the most harmful thing for retail investors. It's the one thing that misleads retail investors the most, and it causes the most amount of financial harm, in my opinion. People look at the market cap and they make all the wrong assumptions based on it. Understand what it is and don't understand what it is not. It's more important. Anyway, try to get back to here, right? Because there are some people who've been sharing this kind of projection, right? And the caution that it's not guaranteed, and nothing is ever guaranteed, right? It's kind of like those weather forecasts that say that there's a 5% chance of a hurricane, right, hitting next year. And interestingly, but you're not going to go ahead and board up your windows just yet, are you? You're going to keep I guess, an eye on things and check in to make sure it's going ahead that way, right? But anyway, the possibility alone, I guess, is a thrilling one, right? It suggests that there's a future where XRP isn't just that coin that we kind of trade on exchanges, but is actually a part of the plumbing of global finance. Now, the XRP ledger handling a slice of what Swift does would mean crypto has finally broken into the high stakes zone, right? It's a huge validation for what crypto can do efficiently, right? at least for efficiency. Now, after kind of hearing all of these things, you might be wondering to yourself, is this really happening right now, or is this just kind of like a blueprint? And honestly, as of now, it's more of a blueprint, right? I don't have any insider information that banks are already secretly doing this on large scale, but they could start, right? And especially now that these analysis and even Ripple insiders have basically kind of greenlit the technical feasibility of it. Banks are pragmatic. If something saves them time or money, you can bet that they're going to have a look at it, right? As long as it's done without breaking rules, they'll eventually kind of adopt those kind of things. Perhaps even quietly at first to kind of test the waters. Now, this whole journey, it kind of changed how I see Swift versus Ripple narrative, right? It might not be the versus after all, right? It could just be Swift and Ripple, with Swift doing the messaging and RippleNet doing the settlement, right? Each playing their own kind of strengths, right? No formal kind of partnerships required here, just a bit of tech glue in the middle, and it kind of reminds me of how back in the day that you would have to choose between, two competing tech formats, right? But then, an anchor comes along that can let you work with both of them. Suddenly, the war doesn't really matter, right? This API bridge is that little adapter for the banking networks, right? One thing for sure here is that I'm going to be watching for any hints that banks are actually trying this out. And I'm not alone here, like the XRP community is on high alert for any kind of breadcrumbs as well. We actually had a kind of pretty animated discussion about this in our Discord server, shameless plug of course, if you haven't yet joined. It's where we kind of have a free educational Discord. The link of course is in the description. It's where we chat about all things crypto and break down news like this together. It's a good time and you might just learn something new every single day. Now, speaking of things that I do every day, I also checked my XRP stash after this research, like I am prepared just in case XRP really starts catching on. Well, I'll admit, I grabbed a little extra, and for the transparency here, I use Kraken Pro to buy XRP and some other coins. I like their low fees and their interface, but there is a bit of a heads up here, right? If you use my Kraken Pro affiliate link that's in the description, it earns a commission here and helps support the channel at no extra cost to yourself. So if you do go ahead and use it, thank you in advance. There's no pressure, of course. Any exchange is fine. Just make sure that you're sorting and storing your crypto securely and not FOMOing into anything just based on a YouTube video. All right, let's wrap this up then with a nice little neat bow. Right, we started out with a late night rumor hunt turning into a story about how old school finance might quietly embrace new technology. Right, the big lesson that I got here was innovation finds a way. Maybe Swift and Ripple never actually send out a joint press release, but behind the scenes, banks could still leverage XRP if it solves a problem for them. And Ripple's smart move to be compatible with existing standards might just mean that the big players are ready. They have the tools in place to plug in immediately. It's a bit poetic actually, XRP, the underdog asset that's, often kind of dismissed by traditional finance, potentially helping to carry a chunk of the world's transactions unknowingly, right, to the majority. Will it actually play out that way? Well, we'll have to wait and see. I'm curiously optimistic, emphasis on the cautious, but I'm going to tell you this. I'm never going to look at Swift versus Ripple debate the same way again, now that I know that it might not need to be enemies after all. So thanks for coming along on this little investigation journey with me. If you've enjoyed it and you want to see more like stories like this, where we kind of peel back the curtain on the crypto world, hit that subscribe button and join me for the next video adventure. Until then though, stay curious, stay safe in the world of crypto, and I'll see you all in the next one.